Hello there, folks. Tonight we're diving headfirst into what is arguably the world's most intractable conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, before we untangle the tangled web of modern politics, we need to understand why this tiny patch of land is such a big deal. First off, we're talking about a region considered holy by three major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Jews revere it as the land of Israel, their biblical homeland, with Jerusalem as its beating heart. Christians hold it sacred as the land where Jesus walked the earth. And for Muslims, it's where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. You see the problem, right? Multiple claims, deep religious significance, and centuries of history make for a very complicated present. Add to that waves of conquest, empires rising and falling, and you've got yourself a recipe for, well, let's just say things haven't been very peaceful. Okay, so fast forward to the late 19th century, Europe's a hot mess of nationalism, and Jews facing rampant anti-Semitism are like, you know what? We need our own place. Enter Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish state in their ancestral homeland Palestine. Meanwhile, the people already living in Palestine, predominantly Arabs, were also developing a sense of national identity. They were like, hold on, we've been here for centuries, this is our home too. And just like that, you've got two groups with legitimate claims and aspirations, on a collision course for, you guessed it, more conflict. Now let's throw some more fuel on the fire, shall we? After World War I, the Ottoman Empire, which had ruled the region for centuries, crumbled. Britain swooped in, took control of Palestine, and promptly made promises they couldn't keep. In the 1917 Balfour Declaration, they pledged support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while simultaneously promising Arabs independence. Shocker, it didn't go well. Imagine telling two people they can have the same orange. That was the British mandate in a nutshell, a recipe for resentment, violence, and a whole lot of frustration. Fast forward to the end of World War II. The horrors of the Holocaust intensified the demand for a Jewish state. So, in 1947, the United Nations, in all its wisdom, came up with a plan: partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab. Jerusalem? Oh, that'll be an internationally administered zone. Simple, right? Wrong. The Jews, despite getting less land than they wanted, reluctantly accepted. The Arabs, seeing it as their land being carved up, rejected it outright. Surprise, surprise, this led to even more violence. Section 5, 1948. A catastrophe and a beginning. And then came 1948. Israel declared independence, and everything went sideways. What followed was a brutal war, the first of many, between Israel and its Arab neighbors. By the time the dust settled, Israel had won, expanding its territory beyond the UN partition plan. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes, becoming refugees. This event, known as the Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, remains a deeply traumatic event in Palestinian memory, shaping their narrative and fueling their struggle for return and self-determination. Section 6, the Six-Day War and its long shadow. Fast forward to 1967 and boom, another war, the Six-Day War. This time Israel emerged victorious again, capturing the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. This victory, while securing Israel's borders, also resulted in the occupation of Palestinian territories, creating a whole new set of problems. The occupation, marked by checkpoints, settlements, and restrictions on movement and resources, has become a defining feature of the conflict, with no end in sight. Section 7, a glimmer of hope, the Oslo Accords and beyond. Now let's talk about peace efforts, or at least attempts at it. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, offered a glimmer of hope. The idea was land for peace. Israel would withdraw from some occupied territories in exchange for Palestinian recognition. But, and there's always a but, things didn't go as planned. Violence continued, settlements expanded, and trust evaporated. The assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, a key architect of the peace process, dealt a devastating blow to any hopes for a quick resolution. Section 8, Life Under Occupation, a Patchwork of Control. So what's the situation on the ground today? Well, it's complicated to say the least. The West Bank is a patchwork of Israeli settlements and Palestinian towns, with the Israeli military controlling security, resources, and movement. Gaza, meanwhile, is under Israeli blockade, facing severe economic hardship and humanitarian crises. This complex reality, with Palestinians living under varying degrees of Israeli control, has fueled tensions, violence, and a profound sense of injustice. Section 9. The human cost, a conflict measured in lives. It's easy to get lost in the politics and history of it all, but let's not forget about the human cost of this conflict. We're talking about generations of Israelis and Palestinians who've known nothing but war, checkpoints, and the constant fear of violence. Thousands of lives have been lost on both sides, families torn apart and futures shattered. The emotional toll, the trauma, the despair, those are the invisible scars that run deep. Section 10. The path forward, challenges and possibilities. So, what's the solution? If I had a simple answer, I'd be sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere, not talking about this on HBO. The two-state solution, with an independent Palestine alongside Israel, remains the most viable option, at least on paper. But it's easier said than done. Issues like settlements, Jerusalem's status, security concerns, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees remain major stumbling blocks. Section 11. A hope for peace. The urgency of a just resolution. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a tangled mess, a Gordian knot of history, religion, and politics. It's a conflict where everyone has a story, a narrative of suffering and injustice. But amidst the despair, there's a glimmer of hope. Both sides have shown, in rare moments, a willingness to talk, to negotiate, to seek a peaceful resolution. The path to peace is long and arduous, but the alternative, continued violence and suffering, is simply unacceptable. The future of both Israelis and Palestinians depends on finding a way to coexist, to build a shared future based on peace, justice, and mutual recognition. That's the hope, at least. And in a conflict as complex and enduring as this one, hope is a precious commodity.